So, and then it's easier to talk about, there was an ad that did work, and it was a very simple ad, and it was for Subaru. And you may have seen it. It has just a couple of lines in it, and it opens and it breaks the rules for car commercials, because for car commercials, you're kind of not supposed to see a squished up car. It's like what happened to you. You're not supposed to see that Jeep after impact. And it's like it's very early morning and the camera's moving in, and you see it's like there's a kind of a freeway thing here, and there's a truck that's going to take this, squished up car away, and there's, one cop is standing next to, I think, another one, or the tow truck driver, I can't remember which character comes up, and is like looking at this car with this look of, oh, boy, that was bad news. And the guy who'd been there for a while turns to him and says, and this is all he says, is, "They survived." And you see the look on this guy's face, looking at the car. And then the tow truck driver, I forget, it's repeated 3 times. He says,
I know the commercial.
Yeah, exactly.
It's implying that, these are safe. I mean, these are safe cars. You want to keep your family safe, your kids safe.
All the way through. All the way. That's all it takes. And then the commercial ends with, you're watching this family of 4 come out. There's a new Subaru there. And the dad turns to the camera and says, "We survived." And that's all it took, because what they knew about their audience is that, which on one level is all of us, is that we all want to believe that if we get into a car accident where our car is squished, what our misbelief, which we're hoping it's a misbelief, is that, okay, if that happens to you, you're a goner. Like, that is pretty much it, very black and white. And what that was fighting against was that, what? If you have this kind of car, you might not be a goner. You might be okay, because that's what this kind of car, that's their first and foremost goal, is to keep you safe. And it was really meaningful. And they showed that, because each time the person turned to the other one and said they survived, the look of like surprise and awe and almost reverence at that, disbelief of, what do you mean they survived? That is so. I mean, it also just tapped into our humanity, the way we want other people to survive. I mean, they were feeling, good about people that they didn't even know, but it conveyed so. It got to me. I mean, you watch a lot of these. Let me tell you something. When you say about, well, you have to be a novelist or a writer to do this, I have to be honest. When I was writing this book and I was watching commercial after commercial after commercial, they were better storytellers than most novelists. I was sobbing most of the time. I mean, it's hard to watch them and not have commercials. You can watch them over and over, and you're still like, tearing up. That extra gum commercial, where the guy proposes with the gum wrapper.
That's a great one. Yeah.
I cry every time. It's not like you don't know what's going to happen. It doesn't matter. Every time in my head, I'm going, okay, I'm not going to tear up. I'm not going to tear up. And then I do. Because
this goes back to your point again. These principles are built into our DNA. And so, guys, think about this. A commercial, what's a commercial? 20, 30, 40 seconds long, maybe a minute in some instances, short of a minute. A whole story is told, massive persuasion takes place, massive levels of emotion are triggered, all kinds of neurotransmitters are being released in your body. That's just big chaotic messes going on. And look at the window of time, and even the minimal use of verbiage. I mean, they use obviously word pictures. I mean, they're using like images, which you can paint images through using words in your stories, but you don't have to. These principles will work whether you're writing a book, a novel, or you're telling somebody a 2-minute story about how they're going to benefit, how other people have benefited from buying your product. Again, I see the connection. Hopefully you see it as well, but I see, again, this is one of the reasons why I love social proof selling and video testimonials. In my mind, as long as they're genuine, not the real schmaltzy stuff you see on some of the infomercials, but like genuine people that aren't, paid actors, like real people who've had real transformation take place in their life or their business, whatever. Those things work, and it works for all the reasons you're saying. And again, when I first did just real quick, I'll tell you the story. When I first did this is what saved my business after I got hit by the dump truck. Mean old Dan Kennedy, I borrowed some money from Joe the German, and who I say that lovingly. He's a man who came here from Berchtesgaden, Germany, with $100 bill in his pocket with an 8th grade education. He lived in Berchtesgaden, Germany, where Adolf Hitler lived. His father had like one of the high-end barber shops in town. Adolf Hitler used to come in there with the SS. They would clear out the shop. Yeah, he didn't call and say, hey, how much to get a haircut? He just showed up. Cleared out the shop with the German shepherds, the bomb dogs. He said his father was terrified that he would cut his hair wrong. Okay. So he was forced to cut his hair, like didn't ask, they would just show up. And so he said he was terrified. Well, anyway, Germany was losing the war. So Joe, at 10 years old, Joe's again now deceased, but 10 years old, they put a gun, the German military inducted him into the army and put a rifle in his hand, put him on a post overlooking a road and said, shoot anything that comes down the road. Well, the first American soldiers he saw on tanks, he said he got so scared he threw the gun down and ran. He deserted. Well, at 10 years old, what are they going to do? So he comes to America. He knew how to cut hair. He comes to America with a $100 bill in his pocket at 17 or 18. He got a job working for Max Factor Jr. in Los Angeles. Everybody knows who Max Factor is. That really helped him. He did Marilyn Monroe's hair. He did Jane Mansfield's hair. He was really, really good at what he did. He moved to the Midwest. By the time he's 25, he's a multimillionaire. He moves to the Midwest, starts his own salon, builds this big salon up. But it was Joe that actually gave me the money after I literally went bankrupt after the dump truck. I bought a brand new house. I had 7 bathrooms in a house. Can you imagine? Just a huge house, 5 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms for a 27-year-old kid. In-ground pool, 2 clinics. I get hit by the dump truck. I lose everything. He gives me the money. I end up really helped us out. Go to Dan Kennedy. Dan says, you need video testimonials. I'm like, well, all of my patients from this practice where I just lost them, I never really got a chance to get started, but I had patients from the other practices that I had. So I had a big event, had all these people at my practice, had it catered, the whole 9 yards, but I had a 92-minute long VHS video of my testimonials, like 32 people, 33 people on it. Very long, 5, 6 minutes, 4-minute testimonials. 10, 15 seconds is all you need. So there's been a big difference that I've learned. So you talk about telling a story, a testimonial on video can tell a story in 10 seconds and have a huge impact. So again, guys, buy these books, invest in them. These again are not books that you're going to read one time and, oh, that's a great story. No, these are like manuals for your success. And so when she talks about writing a novel, just tweak it like I did in your mind and say, okay, to be an effective storyteller, because these principles are universal and they're still going to work. And you're the first person who's actually broken it down and made it so we can actually understand how the process works and do this. But aside from not knowing our audience, Lisa, in your estimation, what do you think the biggest mistake is people when they're doing that, when they're telling stories? What's the biggest mistake aside from not knowing their prospects? What's the biggest story we're making, biggest mistake we're making in the process of telling stories?
Well, there's so much to knowing who your prospect is. I mean, I would say, and the same would be true of writers, is that people write as if it's about something external that happens. And so they just tell us externally, or they'll show somebody changing their mind about something, but we have no idea why they changed their mind. We have no idea what it was that caused that change or how that change took place. So it goes from, I would never do that, to, oh, now I see the light, I'm going to do it, but we don't know how their internal logic shifted to make that be that's what they were going to do, the meaning that they were reading in. And I think that is the biggest mistake people make, not to let us see that. And I kind of call it that internal struggle, that place where suddenly they have the aha moment. I mean, that would be the biggest mistake. Or they'll write people having an aha moment, but we don't know how they got there. I mean, it would be like if you really wanted to try to figure out how to, pick a lock, and you watch someone do something, go, oh, aha, I got it, and they did it. And you're going, okay, but what did you do? How do I do that? Like, what is that exactly? And they gave you no insight into what it was they realized that allowed them to do it. Because that's what we come for. We don't come for external things. We come for the internal reason as to why somebody now is willing to take a risk that they wouldn't take before. We come for that internal reason as to why this thing that you're asking me to do that makes me think my tribe is going to shun me if I do it. You need to show me why not only aren't they going to shun me, but now they're going to turn around and say, wow, that was really brave of you to do that. I mean, it's like, let me give you a very quick example. There was, I happen to love the tagline. I think so many of us love the tagline, the Motel 6 one, we'll leave the light on for you.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was reading, there's a really great, I forget where it was, but there's an article out there where the guy who, I think it was the head of the advertising agency that put that together at the end of the day, trying to figure it out before they got Tom Bodett, whose voice is just so fabulous.
Yes.
So they had these focus groups, and they had focus groups, and they knew that every single person in the focus group had, within the past 6 months, had gone to a Motel 6, right? So every single person there had been to a Motel 6. So they had this focus group, and they said, so, like, what motel would you go to? Where would you stay when you're on the road? And, like, nobody mentions Motel 6, like, not one person. So they're kind of thinking, okay, what should we do? Like, are we doing something wrong? And so they went back and they asked again, kind of rephrased it. And again, no person said, I would go to a Motel 6. And finally they're going, okay, we need to really rethink. We'll ask one more time. Everybody's getting tired. We're spending all this money. They asked a third time. Everybody's like on their way out. Still, nobody says Motel 6. And then finally, as they're about to leave, one person says, well, if it's late and I'm on the road and there's nowhere else, I'll stay at a Motel 6 because then I can save enough money on gas to bring my grandkid a stuffed animal. And at that moment, everybody else came up with a similar story. Stopped. They came back. They said, yeah, me too. Yeah, it allows me to do that. Yeah, it makes me feel. And what happened was they flipped from feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to look like a cheapskate. If I admit that I go to Motel 6, they're going to think like I also dumpster dive. It's not going to go over well with my tribe. But when someone finally, I guess they were exhausted and beaten down and maybe felt like, okay, I got to say something because this is true, as opposed to them, everybody else thinking, which they could have, oh, that's the dumpster diver and we would never do that. Instead, that person came across as somebody who was really courageous, right? They're brave. They were willing to be, and this is the key thing in any story, willing to be vulnerable, to really open up and admit to something that they knew other people might look down on them for. And what tends to happen when we're willing to do that is other people turn around and don't go, that's the idiot. They go, me too. I feel that way too. That is me too. So, I mean, that's sort of the point of all of it, is coming through and making them see that thing that's holding them back is actually something that not only makes you your more authentic self, but that other people are probably going to go, yeah, that was the smart person who said that. And that's what makes you a leader. Because the reason that people aren't willing to make those changes, or even aren't willing to tell you what they really think, is in focus groups, good luck for getting somebody to really tell you what they think, is that they don't want to be vulnerable. We're terrified in the time we're tiny of saying what we really think and what we feel. What we want to say is what we think our tribe is gonna like. So it's breaking that down as much as possible, and that's what stories do, because we're watching someone and we're thinking maybe, oh my gosh, they're going to do that, and the tribe's going to shun them, and then it flips around and they do it, and in fact, that's the very thing that pulls them in, and that we feel, oh my God, they could be brave and vulnerable at the same time. It's it's like that old, you can't be brave unless you're scared. People go, I'm fearless. It's like, well, that doesn't mean anything. You can't be brave if you're fearless. You can't be courageous if you're fearless.
That's one of the biggest reasons why people will not buy. They'll give you a different reason. That's one of the biggest reasons people won't buy, is because they're afraid they're going to look like an idiot to their family, to their spouse, to someone else, or they can look at it and say, well, that's great for them, but it's not going to work for me. And so that's just, these are underlying processes. You got time for a couple more questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So based on what I read in your book, when you're telling an effective story, when you're doing this right, you can literally get someone to actually mentally, I don't want to say this incorrectly, but they kind of check out. They're often like fantasy land. They're like, it's like daydreaming in your car. You're driving along, but you're not cognizant of the fact that you're driving along. You're living somewhere else in your mind at that moment. And when we tell an effective story, what is it, as far as, this is like a brain science question. What is it? What's going on there when we can actually take somebody to that magical place like I talked about at the beginning of the show? What's going on in our brains to allow that to happen? Because if we understand what's happening, then we can actually reproduce it if we learn how to do this right.
It's basically sort of two things. One is literally, as I said earlier, they've done those fMRI studies that show that when you're lost in a story, the same areas of your brain light up that would light up if you were doing what that character is doing. You literally really are there. What it activates in our brain is both that and that notion of, I know I keep doing this. It's like a Vulcan mind melt. We're literally on the same wavelength, but that means that that character has to have a wavelength. And the wavelength is how they're making sense of what's happening. If they're not, then we are just going to supply our own beliefs that are very surface as to why a person would be doing what they're doing. It's going to be surface, it's going to be generic, it's not going to get you anywhere. If we're not down there feeling what they're feeling, their motivation, the meaning they're reading into it, why it matters to them, it activates those neural pathways, and literally then we are feeling it as if we're there, and we have literally checked out. I mean, and they've done the research. The evolutionary biologists said that the reason why that happens, biologically what's happened is first you get a hit of dopamine.
Right.
And dopamine is that neurotransmitter that, that makes you, curiosity is basically it. And it's not just pleasure. We used to think of it as the pleasure transmitter, but it's curiosity because we think we are going to get a reward at the end. But the two other neurotransmitters that become this biological cocktail. Catapults us out of reality is the other one is cortisol. And cortisol, as we know, is when we're anxious. And we're anxious because we want to know what's going to happen. Is this person in danger? How are they going to get out of the situation that I know if I was in, I'd be terrified I would get ostracized or whatever bad would happen. And then the third chemical is oxytocin. And oxytocin is empathy. And empathy is we care. That's why even if you're telling a story about yourself, because it doesn't mean you can't tell stories about yourself, you just can't say how great you were or what you did is. But if you are allowed to be yourself to be self-deprecating, you're putting yourself in a situation where you might be embarrassed or you might be mortified. And again, being embarrassed or mortified goes deeper than physical pain. Our memory of physical pain is far less imprinted than they say, in fact, that the only memory where you really are there so much is when you remember something that mortified you. Like, think about it. You don't have to feel awful, but some moment where you were like so deeply embarrassed and your whole body goes into that same high alert. So those three chemicals end up pulling us in, and they literally put the time out on reality. And evolutionary biologists believe the reason for that is because that's what allowed us to plan for the future, right? I mean, in the beginning, stories weren't about, sit around the campfire and this will be an enjoyable, fun way to go into a world of make-believe and leave reality behind. Stories were ways to figure out, given what we know of the past and what things happened, if I find myself in this situation, this is what I need to do to survive. And so that's the whole point of story, is figuring out how to survive and thrive in situations that we haven't quite been in yet. That's why we have story to begin with. We make such a big mistake to think that story, as I said before, is about something that's auxiliary or something that's just, or make-believe, meaning not real. It is literally how we make sense of
everything. Yeah, everything. Okay, so this might be, I won't say it's the most important question, but for me personally, I think it's the most important question. But for everybody listening, this is probably the second most important question. You talked at length about having an intimate understanding of your target market, of your prospects, of the people you're trying to appeal to, whether it's to sell a book or to sell a product, a service, whatever it is. You got to know these people on a super intimate level. Here's my question. How do we learn this information? Whether it's a tool, a company, a process, Lisa, how do we learn these intimate things, these little nuances, the backstory? How do we gather that research?
I mean, I think if you don't have the money for a focus group, I think there's so many different things that you can do. And so much of it these days is social media. I mean, so much of it these days is really trying to figure out. I mean, the first thing I think you want to do is what you said a while ago, which is, okay, who don't you want? You really want to figure out, because the answer to who's your audience is never everyone. Right? It's never everyone.
Never.
It's like, who is your audience? And then maybe even for this particular, campaign that you're going to do, what strata of that audience are you trying to reach? And then I think it really is kind of going down and doing the research, whether it's going online and finding other companies that do similar things that you do, seeing who follows them, seeing, following them either on Instagram or on Twitter or on Facebook, seeing places that they comment, what do they actually say? You can dive into it that way. I think if it's an audience that is not, particularly media savvy, like a much older group, it literally would be going and finding out where they congregate and then going there and really talking to people. But again, it's really hard to ask direct head-on questions. I mean, you kind of have to, because people aren't going to tell you inherently.
This is skill. Yeah, you got to build trust.
And you got to keep asking why. People will give you the easiest answer and the safest answer first. You got to keep asking why, and you can't judge. There can't be any shaminess to anything. Everything has to be completely okay. But I think there's a lot of social media ways to do this now that there did not used to be in the past, obviously, at all. But that would be I go to that in depth in my book, and that would be my advice on that. And I'm assuming people probably already know a lot of that, but I think even following people and then seeing who they follow and then seeing what they post and seeing why, if there's a company similar to yours, how you're different from them, what you're offering. I mean, I know that's something that I did with what I write. I could see what every other writing manual or writing instructors offered, and then I could completely see why what I was offering was different, and then I could completely see how that tapped in to what I knew that my audience was looking for.
Great answer. Yeah, that's a great answer. So just a couple things real quick. We've all seen like cuts, maybe it was from Family Vacation or whatever, where the kids kept saying, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" We all know that. Are we there yet? How much farther? Are we there yet? So you got me really excited about the third book. So you may have to block me because I'm going to be sending emails like almost every day. Is it done yet? Is it done yet? Is the book done yet? Is it done yet? I'm really looking forward to your book. But Lisa, what's the one question today that I should have asked you that I didn't?
Oh, it's probably something I'll think of like in an hour from now. What would be the one question?
Relevant to people using story in business to be like, to build a more solid brand influence in the marketplace, to be more persuasive, to be more engaging, to be more effective at selling. What didn't I ask?
The things that come to mind are two things. One is general, and it really would have hit harder on emotion and why social intelligence is not a soft science and is absolutely the most important tool in your toolbox. Why facts really don't work at all, and really why we can't make a single decision. I love diving into that part anyway, if we can't feel emotion, because I think that is what stops people from really diving in, because they think of it as soft science because it makes them feel uncomfortable, because we feel so much safer with something that seems very quantifiable. I think it's what's wrong with our basic education system, is that it judges people based on the kind of quote unquote intelligence, which is not intelligence, which is quantifiable. So
Right.
If you know math or you know all of the capitals of all of the states in alphabetical order, so what? What difference does that make in any way, shape, or form? It doesn't. It's social intelligence, emotional intelligence that really makes a difference. And then the other thing I would say that just sort of came to mind really has to do with sharpening and figuring out, based on who your audience is, what point you have to make. And that point is what you would figure out based on what that misbelief is. And by misbelief, I would say, is what is it that your target audience believes that will keep them from doing what it is that you want them to do? What belief do you have to overcome? And then the other thing that we didn't talk about at all would be identifying the place where what you are offering them solves a problem that they already have. So it's going to tap into it. And then the third layer of that is how being able to tap into that and solving that problem will give them, for lack of a better way of putting it, more social cred, meaning they'll feel their most authentic self. Because we're all, we're so wired to need other people. We're all people who needs people. In fact, when you hear about lone wolf, people go, I'm a lone wolf. Do you know what a lone wolf actually is in the wolf community?
An outcast.
Yeah, an outcast. A lone wolf is somebody who cannot work with other people, and they're an outcast, and they end up dying. Nobody is really a lone wolf. We all got here because everybody worked together and made roads and made electricity. And, none of us exist alone, but we all need to be part of a particular tribe. And I guess the last thing, and we did talk about this a bit, is really how important it is to respect those places where even when you know you're 1,000% right, if you start telling your audience the truth, and let's imagine it is true, you are 100% right, it's the truth. If you are stepping on a deeply held belief that they've got, they're going to come back at you with a screed, and you will have no way. Not only won't they believe what you're saying, but you'll be locked out forever. You got to find a way in that is gonna, which doesn't mean you can't change. It doesn't mean that you can't show them that what they're doing might be wrong or not working or erroneous. But you got to find a way in that respects them. And I think that is the biggest thing. You got to respect your audience. You got to, even when I'll tell you a story that I just heard. Because the world is so falling apart. And I finally got in a place where I don't want to listen to news anymore. If something bad is happening, I'll get an alert, I'll get an email from some, news source. So I've been trying to listen to podcasts that are like either, business or calming. And I was listening to the one on Mr. Rogers, right? You can't get more calming than Mr. Rogers. So there's this great podcast on Mr. Rogers, and he was talking to somebody, the host of the show was talking to, I think, somebody who Mr. Rogers had worked with. And I think it was another minister. I think it was a minister who came and said to Mr. Rogers that he was leaving the church that he was in, not the church itself, but that particular,
right.
Because the guy he worked for didn't like him, was completely mean to him, was just really doing these really super unfair things. And what Mr. Rogers said was, I wonder what happened to him when he was a little boy that made him so angry so that he couldn't really see what was going on. I wonder what happened to him. Now, he wasn't invalidating this other guy's experience. He wasn't saying because of that, it should be fine that this guy treats you that way. But that's the point. When people are doing and saying things that seem so cruel or so like, how could you believe that? It always traces back to something that happened to them when they were kids, whether it's some traumatic experience or just, growing up in a family. When we're kids and we grow up, we don't think this is how my family is, but other people are different. We think this is how people are.
This is how the world is. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was once speaking at to a writer's workshop, and this one woman said, she goes, when I was a kid, she said, both my parents were forensic pathologists. And she said, I didn't go to anybody else's house for dinner till I was about 8. And when I came home, she said, I went to my parents' and I was shocked. She said, Mom and Dad, I had dinner there last night and nobody talked about dead bodies. That wasn't just everybody's, dinner table conversation.
Yeah.
So that's often what you're up against. And that's why respecting it doesn't mean they're right. It doesn't mean you agree with them. But respecting it and not vilifying them for it makes such a difference. It's the only way we can ever really communicate. Because that's sort of my goal with the new book that I'm writing is besides here's how to tell stories, and in order to do it, to really understand the seminal and good and evolutionary role that emotion plays and will always play. Emotion mainlines meaning to us so that we know in a split second what to do and what things mean. It's not something to be, when people go, I'm not going to let my emotions carry me away. I'm not going to be emotional. I'm going to be calm. And I always want to go, dude, calm is an emotion.
Yep.
You are always feeling emotion. And then just to really, respect the other side, even when they're 100% wrong, or at least not vilify them as, well, they're stupid or they're idiots or they're, if only they knew X, Y, or Z. Because it also will stop you from going, well, they've never heard of my idea before. They've never heard of my plan before. The minute they hear of it, they'll do it. And it's like, yeah, not really. The minute they hear of it, they'll think of all the reasons why they shouldn't. So.
Okay, so let's do this. What about What's the best way for people to learn more about you, to buy your books? Obviously, you're on Amazon and Goodreads and every imaginable Barnes and Noble,
Yeah.
every imaginable place you can buy books.
I have a website, which is just wiredforstory.com. I
Okay.
also have a number of online courses on both creativelive.com, and I have a story class on lynda.com.
And then, so you can actually, and you probably did, we talked about this earlier, but I didn't ask this specifically. Did you send me those links in the information you sent me? Because I want to put those in the show notes.
I will give
Okay.
I might not have sent you some stuff that I will.
Okay. Send me those for sure. I'll put those in the show notes. Guys, take the class. I think I'm going to end up taking the classes as well. Lisa, thanks for being on the show today. This was awesome, man. This was like, I feel like I just got like a $10,000 masterclass from the master.
Yay. Thank you. Yeah.
It's really good.
It was my utter pleasure. There's nothing I like more than talking story, because it's talking about people and how the brain, like, what is more interesting than that?
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it thoroughly. So probably two weeks or so, I want to try to fast track this because we just finished. Well, now it's been a month or so ago we finished it, but still I want to get this out as soon as possible because it'll help people. And this will encourage them. I mean, this was a very uplifting interview. Sometimes I have to drag stuff out of people and they're just not, like you said, their level of emotional intelligence is not that good. They've got a lot of information, but they're just not really good communicating. But your authenticity and your passion and your love for what you do came out. And guys, if you're just listening to the podcast as opposed to watching it on YouTube, I want to encourage you to watch it as well, because Lisa is a very animated person. I am as well, but I try to hold myself back. You remind me a lot of my wife because she's very animated as well. And it's one of the things I love about her, but it just helps express what it helps get your point across, communicate much more effectively.
I can't talk. I'll tell you a funny story. When the first book came out and I was giving a talk at Powell's, the big bookstore in and it was a big giant like room, and they said, here's a mic, and they gave me this handheld mic, and I held it and my mind went blank, because if I can't do this, I can't talk. And luckily I have a loud voice and it echoed, and I said, I have to put this down, and then it came back and I was able to do it. Yeah, I literally can't speak if I can't do this. So you said Pals. The Pals that I'm familiar with, I used to live in downtown Portland, is Pals City of Books, the 4-story. Yes.
That is my dream location. I mean, I love that bookstore. Guys, this is a 4-story, covers a couple blocks. I mean, it's just huge, and it's 4 stories tall, and it's just acres and acres and acres of new and used books. I went there for the old books.
Yeah.
And there's a sweet coffee shop on the top floor. I mean, every kind of book you can imagine. It's an experience to go there. You just don't go there for a little while. You got to go there for I used to live probably a 10-minute walk. I lived in the Pearl District. Is that the one you're talking about?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, absolutely.
I loved it. Brings back a lot of memories. So anyway, hey, Lisa, thanks for being on the show. And I'll get back to you real soon with the links and stuff on this. And maybe we can do it again when your new book comes out.
Totally, I'd love to.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My utter pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.